Thank you, Dr. Patrick. That was wonderful. Is this good? Sound is good?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, you guys. That was awesome, right? Go ahead and if you could grab a seat and then just uncross your legs and put your feet on the floor for me. And then in honor of Dr. Patrick's lecture, I want to start out with a little Brahmari. Does anybody know what Brahmari is? It's the bee breath. So I'm going to do a little bee breathing. All right, so what you're going to do is take your thumbs, and your thumbs are going to seal off that little space. And then take your index finger, middle finger, and ring finger and place those guys over your eyes. And then your baby fingers are going to rest just where the cartilage and the hard tissue and the soft tissue meet. So what you'll do is have everything open on your inhale. So when you go to take the breath in, just pull that space away from your eyes and your ears. But then as you exhale, you're going to go ahead and seal off these places, seal off these parts, and your exhale will be a Cool? Could you guys hear where you're all sealed up? So it's a little funky because you want to seal up as much as you can so that you really get that internal experience. Let's do a few rounds of it, okay? So go ahead and take a nice full breath in. Exhale and let's go. Big full breath. Few more. One more, last one. Cool. Pause for a second. Just close your eyes, relax your mind. And just take a couple of normal breaths in and out through the nose. And then go ahead and roll your shoulders around a few times. Loosen your shoulders up around your spine. And reverse the direction. And then circle your head. Take your head from left to right. And then reverse the direction. And then go ahead and interlace your fingers. Bring those guys in front of your eyes and circle your wrists. Other way. Shake your fingers out. Take a big breath in and let it out through your mouth. Ha! Okay. Turn to somebody you do not know and introduce yourself and say hello and get to know them. Hi, I'm Kristen Rae.
Carlos.
Carlos, it's very nice to meet you. You're taking some photos? Okay. Lovely, lovely. It's very good to meet you. You're a photographer?
I'm a photographer.
Okay.
You can teach me.
Yeah, I teach some stuff, exactly. Yeah. Cool. Cool, cool. All right, you guys. What's that? No? We can chat a little bit more during lunch. But yeah, so you guys feel good? Feel open? Feel alive? All right, so as Dr. Patrick was talking about, so Brahmari, right? Brahmari is called the bee breath, and the bee breath is used in Ayurveda to treat nervous conditions, right? So it really is exactly what he was talking about. The sound, the tone, right, actually has a deep resonance with the nervous system. So everything has a reason, right? So there's a reason I told you left to right. There's a reason I told you breath in and out. Everything's got a purpose or reason. And a little bit of what I want to talk to you guys about today is the subject of Ayurveda, right? And then the subject of Ayurveda, because it's a pretty big subject, the subject of Ayurveda in terms of busy people, busy bodies, right? So I assume that many of you are New Yorkers, maybe not, but we're all modern folks, right? So we're all here living in this, technological, era. And so, we're busy folks. We take great pride in the study of multitasking, right? So there's this beautiful quote. I want to make sure I get it right. So absolute, unmixed attention is prayer. Right, so in other words, your undivided individual attention in any subject, whether it's brushing your teeth, whether it's listening to a lecture, whether it's riding the subway, whether it's taking photographs, right, becomes more enhanced, right, with that individual attention. And so that can border on the level of a spiritual connection, right, or that can just border on the line of connection, right, which is, in my opinion, what all great medicine really is. It's really about connecting the dots. And so sometimes those dots are through medicines, right? Allopathic or otherwise. Sometimes those dots are through really understanding somebody's health history. Or sometimes those dots are really through just understanding somebody's daily life. And that's a little bit of what I'm here to talk to you guys about today. Oftentimes, pause for a second. I'm going to go back for just a moment. Are you guys familiar with Joseph Gordon-Levitt's new film called The Walk? Okay. Are you guys familiar with him, the actor? Right, so really talented man, really interesting, wonderful person. He recently played or portrayed, there's a Frenchman by the name of Philippe Petit. And Philippe Petit he's a wire walker. And in 1974, when the World Trade Center was being built, he was living in Paris, and he was studying being a wire walker, and he set his life's goal and his life ambition on taking his wire and placing it between the two towers and making this great achievement. And so, of course, he was like, oh, that's crazy, that'll never happen, da, da, da. But what was so amazing and so nattering, so I just saw this film on Friday, was the attention, right? So he had to do incredible amounts of preparation, right? Learning how to place the wire so that the wire would be safe, right? Learning, of course, how to walk the wire, right? So that his undivided attention in his skill and his talent, right, was sure-footed. Then gathering his team, he met a wonderful photographer who was interested in him from a visual perspective, and then immediately became interested in him from his passion and his gift and his dream, and on and on. And so he put together this amazing team. And the very interesting thing is, of course, because of what we know of terrorism and of course what's happened to the trade centers themselves, there was a window of time where he went and he did a great deal of spying. So he was spying on the construction workers, he was spying on the people who were working in the buildings, he was spying on the city goers. He was doing this amazing thing so that he found the right opportunity and the right window to bring all of his gear up there, to put that cable across, and to perform this amazing feat. So the timing and the window that he had, right, came together, and that old adage of preparation meets opportunity, or opportunity meets preparation, right, was there for him. This day and age, I think people would be pretty suspicious if there was somebody, down in front of a tall building with binoculars and, on and on and on. That era, obviously, as we all know, has changed. But so it was quite interesting, all of the work that went into this, and then, of course, how the timing gave him this opportunity to really live his prayer, right? To live his experience. And so Ayurveda is a really great science that is also an art. And the art, right, is in this timing or rhythm, right, that Dr. Patrick was talking about when he was just talking about even the seasonal cycles of his bees, right? So there's so many cycles that are going on that some of us maybe are familiar with or tuned into on some level, but to be truly tuned in, right? Oftentimes if you talk to like an elite athlete, if you talk to someone who's really achieved something remarkable or special, you know, that you say, well, what were you thinking? What were you doing? You know, what was, you know, nothing. Nothing. I was in the zone, right? Because all of the many components, right, came together for this unique experience to happen, right? So when we are at our best, when we are in our most joyous, when we are in our most loving and compassionate and undivided space, that's when we are being either mothers or artists or doctors or whatever role it is, with no confusion, right? Everything is super clear and that rhythm has been set up. And so we're not thinking about any distraction, right? Or any confusion or something else. It's allowing us this undivided attention. And so the beautiful thing that's happening all the time is there's a natural rhythm that occurs in the day, in the night, in the cycles of the seasons, right, all around us. And if we can kind of learn or kind of tap into those rhythms in our own personal experience, oftentimes then we start to become emboldened, empowered, enriched, and rejuvenated in such a way that we're not thinking about monitoring this problem or that situation. We're just living in, you know, our bliss. Are you guys familiar with Ayurveda? Yeah, a little bit. Cool. So Ayurveda is it's an amazing science that comes from the subcontinent of India, right? And so even though it's coming from this area, it has so much to apply here in the now, right? During college, my college years, I was a nanny. And so I was a nanny at this lovely household, except for when I moved into the household, it was kind of a new marriage, right? So there was two people. He had a previous marriage, and so from the previous marriage, he had a teenage son. So he had teenage hormones going on. They had a toddler, so they had a 2.5, 3-year-old, and then they had a new baby who was a little bit colicky. They had just moved from the city to the suburbs, so we were out in the burbs and surrounded by lots of land, lots of space. So there was lots of driving, there was lots of getting to know new schedules, being very confused. The household had no rhythm to it. You had a very cranky teenager, you had a mother with postpartum depression, you had a trader who was kind of working any hours he wanted to because he could, right? So he was all excited about that. So he was keeping no schedule, right? So there was a lot of confusion, there was a lot of intensity in the household, right? And one day we went to go pick up the toddler at school, and we blew out the engine of the car because they hadn't gotten the oil changed after 9,000 miles, right? Because they just weren't paying attention to things, right? So that night we got home, and the head of the household, the mother said, we need to get Teddy, the baby, the infant, we need to get him on a sleep schedule. And it was the hardest thing to do. A colicky baby, you take a colicky baby and you put them on a sleep schedule, so you start to get that happening, and that becomes an infant screaming, an infant crying, right? So all of a sudden, we had to just walk away, we had to shut that door. It was so painful, so difficult. But the next thing we know, Teddy got on a schedule. Then the little boy got on a schedule. Then everybody started getting on a schedule of eating and sleeping and rhythm, and the house started to become a happy house. Things started falling into place. At this time in my life, I didn't know anything about Ayurveda. I didn't have any good advice as far as that. But the very nature of landing those routines and really following those routines, people started to know where they were supposed to be, what they were supposed to be doing at a certain time of day. And some people started becoming a little happier, a little more blissful, right? They were able to do what it was that they were supposed to do. Toddler, mother, otherwise, right? So oftentimes with Ayurveda, people go, oh gosh, it's really complex, it's really confusing, there's so much. And it's true, there's a ton, right? And so sometimes the medicine is this very unique prescription of herbs and herbal remedies. And then sometimes it's these really rigorous or very intense therapies, right, that are unique to Ayurveda or otherwise. Or sometimes it's making this massive, high shift in diet, or it's that perfect food. But oftentimes, right, it's just saying, hey, like what's going on? Like, what time do you usually get to bed? 2 a.m. Cool, what time are you usually waking up? Well, it's different every day. Let's get you on a sleep schedule, right? When do you eat? Well, oftentimes I just skip lunch. Like I'm too busy, I don't have enough time to eat. Like it's just better if I just like go all day. Okay, so do you have breakfast? Sometimes, like maybe I'll grab a coffee or like, you know, a bagel. All right, so when do you have dinner? Oh, well, depends. Like, you know, some days it's this, some days it's that, blah, 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 blah. Oh, well, let's get you on a food schedule. How's lunch? Can you make 15 minutes for lunch? Oh, yeah, I could do that. Sometimes, right, it's starting to make these little changes, just like we did with the baby, just like we did with the toddler, just like we did with the household, that all of a sudden people start going, oh, right, that's all I need is like a little nutrition, a little pause, a little shift in my day to be able to give me stamina, strength, and a little space away from what I was doing to come back and be a better mother, a better worker bee, a better what have you. And so there's a lot of these, so there's a funny, you know, thing in Ayurveda that there's right? The very simple nature of this practice, of this science. And it's true, right? That it's exciting to think, oh, there's these really rare, super exotic plants that are growing in the top of the Himalayas, and if we go and we get this like one mineral and then this one plant and we put it together and it becomes this super amazing, like powerful, enriched, multi-dimensional herb that all my ills will be gone. But oftentimes that's not the case at all, right? So you can drink amrita, right? Or nectar, right, from the hive, and that may be the medicine. But how are you receiving that medicine? How is that medicine working on you and the rest of your day and your nights, and how you are living your life? What's the rhythm of your experience? You guys like music? Yeah. So when you hear a really good song, it doesn't matter, classical, rock, whatever, when you hear a really good song, right, and it just gets in there, what is it that gets in there first? Is it the lyrics? It's the beats, right? So many times people just get that movement, right, and they get super excited about the sound and the rhythm and the beat, and then all of a sudden they're singing, and you turn to them and go, oh yeah, wait, what are you singing? Hold on. Oh, I've been singing this Prince song for 20 years. Oh, those aren't the lyrics, you know? And they don't care. It doesn't matter. They're singing the wrong lyrics, but all that matters to them is the beat, right? It's the rhythm, right? So there are certain things, just like Dr. Patrick was discussing with you guys, that there are certain rhythms or better times to do things according to Ayurveda. And this is where people get a little funky, right? Because sometimes we like to make rules and then be like, oh, well, okay, this is the map, and if I follow this map completely and 100%, then again, my life will be perfect, right? And so that's the complicated and also unique quality of Ayurveda is individualized, and it's a living science. So anything that you chart and you box and you say, here's the answer, that may be the answer in the now. But remember, if we are organic by nature, we are constantly shifting, constantly moving, and it needs to then move with you. So what may work now may not work 3 weeks from now, or 3 months from now, or 3 years from now. So you always have to go back and check in with the season and the rhythm that you're responding to. Are you guys familiar with the doshas? Yes, okay. So in Ayurveda, there's a couple of different, and I'll give you a quick rundown here. I know some of you guys are like nodding your heads, yes, some of you know. So in Ayurveda, there's the 5 elements, right? Or the elemental natures: earth, air, fire, water, and ether. And when you take these elements and you put them together, they create the entire universe, organic and inorganic matter, right? So this mic, right? Your skin, the street, right? All of the universe, Pluto. And then when you start dividing them up, Ayurveda begins to look at them in terms of body composition. And in that body composition, we've got something called doshas, or they're similar to biological humors, right? And so you've got the air and ether combined, making vata. And vata is responsible for movement and flow, right? So any time you feel like you're really in the flow, in the zone, right? There's usually some flow through wind, which is also associated with vata. And then pitta. Pitta is when fire and water combine. And pitta is more of the rhythmic qualities of fire. So if you watch a fire, it's not random, right? It's got a little organizational to it. So there's that. And then when you combine earth and water, right, you've got the kapha or kapha component, and that's the container, right? So in a biological humor, that's going to be more of the phlegm, right? And so when all of these guys are kind of working, they're supporting your entire organism throughout a daily cycle, and then a yearly cycle, and then your life cycle. Dinacharya, right, or daily rhythm, is one of the first practices that we start to look at when we look at getting some body into good rhythm or good health. And so what we look at is we look at the daily cycle of the moon and the stars and the sun. That is equally important with your own personal moon and stars and sun, right? So what's above as is below. So the macrocosm of the universe and the planets have everything to do with the microcosm of your own personal universe and your own personal planets. So in other words, your water, your organ systems, your blood, right? Your metabolic rate, your heart rate, and on and on and on, have a particular rhythm to it. Oftentimes I'll have clients come to me and they'll say, I'm a night owl, I'm totally a night owl. And so I'll just nod my head and say, okay. The very nature of human being, we are not nocturnal. And when I work with people like nurses and sometimes physicians who do have to do the night shift, trust me, we're not nocturnal. They have very complicated health conditions. If you have to work a night shift for some time, you may be uncomfortable. If you have to work a night shift for a decade or more, you have some pretty serious health stuff that's starting to manifest, depending on your constitution and your body's nature. But we are diurnal, right? So who gets up nowadays by like 5:36? Cool. So wintertime, we get to sleep in a little bit, right? So the sun rises a little bit later. We've got that whole happening going on with the daylight savings and that. But when you're awake, what do you hear? It's a little bit difficult because it's New York City. I know we're not living in, mountain bliss, but there's a few trees near and around. You hear the birds, and they've been up since 2:33, right? So all of nature's creatures, right? They don't wait for the sun to get them up and about. They greet the sun. So they start to get their life cycles and their body cycles and their body rhythms going early so that they're ready, so that they're prepared for that first light. In this time of day, between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., give or take, Vata, or air in ether, is dominant in the body. So it's a lot easier to kind of get your butt out of bed, right, if you take advantage of that. Depending on your constitution, right, it's difficult for people who have a lot of Vata in their constitution to wake up too early because their nervous systems by nature are pretty fragile. So they can kind of get up on the later end. But if someone has a lot of Kapha in their constitution, then they should be getting up as early as possible. However, right, so you've got all this light, all this wind, all of this energy kind of guiding you to get your day started. And then what comes next? So between the hours of 6, maybe 7, to like 10 in the morning, how do you feel generally when you get to the office or when you get wherever you are? Energetic. Feel energetic? Great. Anybody have the morning slump? You're in that morning meeting, maybe even right now, where you feel like you're nodding off and you might need a little coffee, right? So that's kapha. That's like the morning heaviness or the morning weight, right? That's starting to kind of settle in. Kapha, right, like I was saying earlier, it's the container, it's the foundation, it's the heavy stuff, it's the heavy lifting. So, one of the best things to do, right, is to do your emails, right, to do your chores, to do your kind of heavy lifting, right, to kind of get things moving. The worst thing you can do is schedule a creative meeting at 10 or 11 a.m. Your team, they're not there, right? But I know a lot of people, that's what they have to do. That's what, that's where their day starts as far as schedules. Then, about 10 a.m. until 2 in the afternoon, what's going on outside with that great ball of fire? It's rising, right? About noon, no matter where you are on the planet, the sun is at its highest point in the sky. Your personal sun, right, is also at its highest point. The hydrochloric acids and the stomach acids are saying, I could use something right now. When's lunch? So if you have somebody on your team that's got some pretty strong pitta in their constitution, they got a really strong fire, and you ask them to have a lunch meeting, and they say, not until I eat, that's because they're taking good care of pitta dosha. The sun wants to work, so give it something to work on. And no, a Lara bar or a Kind bar is not lunch, right? So grabbing something on the run, trying to eat in the middle of a meeting, trying to eat while doing emails or phone calls, right? That's not a lunch. You gotta have some food. And if there's nothing to burn up, then pitta gets angry. And sometimes that means that you're gonna mouth off to your boss. Sometimes that means that you're gonna feel a little bit spaced out, right? And then over time, you're weakening your own fire because the fire's got nothing to do. So over time it says, fine, you know what? I'm not gonna show up anymore. She just keeps blowing me off, so. And then people come in with digestive complaints because their agni, or their power of digestion, gets low. Then, afternoon, about 2 a.m. or 2 p.m., sorry, we get back into what have we done already? Vata, Pitta, Kapha. What's next? Anybody can figure it out? We go into Vata mode, right? So about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, does anybody, some of you may feel that you feel sluggish. We'll talk about that. But do any of you feel super creative, like you want to sit down and you want to write a book, or you want to go to a dance class, or you want to talk a lot? Right? So that afternoon time, that is the most brilliant time to have your creative meetings with your team. Right? People are on fire. That's when they've got really brilliant thoughts. All the synapses are moving quite clearly. Things are happening. So get everybody together then, after lunch, so that people have got some fuel. Give them a little time to relax, and then put in a good chunk of work. If you skip lunch, that's when you go and you reach for the afternoon Starbucks, or the chocolate, or whatever it is that you reach for. Because you have nothing, you got nothing to give, and you got nothing in the body. Does that make sense? Generally, right, then you leave work if you're on the schedule, right? And maybe you'll do some exercise, maybe you'll go and meet friends, maybe who knows what'll happen. But oftentimes, because we're New Yorkers and we're city folks, we won't take a meal. We won't take a meal, at like 6, 7, maybe even 8. Sometimes we'll wait, right? And so we'll wait till late. But there is this natural dip, right? This natural dip that happens between 6 and 9. And here we are, we're coming back into the kapha cycle, where people start to feel really relaxed, right? And they start to feel really comfortable and really homey. But rather than keeping that energy going and kind of preparing for the night's sleep, then they'll start to jump on the internet or watch a really super exciting TV program about 10 or 11, and then they'll get really super stimulated, and then they'll maybe start answering emails and then making some notes for the day, and then all of a sudden it's midnight, and then they're like, oh my God, I can't sleep, and I'm getting more and more wired, and then you start to get into that vicious cycle of no sleep. So after that initial kapha stage from like 6 till 9, 6 till 10, we get right back into that pitta mode. And so if you have a lot of pitta in your constitution, or if you just start to get caught up in something, so pitta is about thinking and ideas, so if that thing that you've been thinking about or wanting to do or wanting to pursue all of a sudden gets in there, and it's got a hold on you, then there you are, and you're starting to burn the midnight oil, right? So you start to spend a little bit too much time stimulating the nervous system and stimulating the brain, and the brain is saying, oh great, like this is what I want to do, except for this cycle of pitta, right? This is actually the cleanup cycle. So the cleanup being that it's best for the body and the body's immunity and the body's longevity to actually be at a state of rest
between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 to 3. And that is, according to Ayurveda, the best time for sleep. So if you are only able to sleep 6 hours, those are the hours that you should be getting for the body's health. This is where basically we leave the building and the janitor comes through and he picks up all of the bottles, right? And he sweeps the floor, right? And he takes out the trash. And if we're all here and we're doing lectures and we're doing stuff and we're like, oh my God, there's so many ideas and chatting, then he says, okay, well, I'll come back later. But he doesn't come back because we've taken the space. And so things get a little dirty, a little dirtier, a little dirtier. And then all of a sudden, certain levels of dis-ease and disharmony start to enter the body. So if you're at any predisposition for vulnerability, right, as Dr. Patrick was talking about, all of the autoimmune diseases that are out there, specifically the MS. There are certain ones that are kind of more popular right now in terms of more and more diagnoses, right? This is where some of those hard-hitting ones, like diabetes and MS, and then maybe even certain levels of arthritis, start to actually get into the body a little more deeply. Because the body, by its very nature, by its very rhythm, it wants health and prosperity and goodness for you for the entirety of your life. It's just that it needs certain things during certain times. And of course, we're talking about a perfect model. So if you've got a huge deadline, if you have a brand new baby, right? If you're going through a traumatic experience, right? And on and on and on, there are certain times in our life where living kind of this ideal schedule doesn't exactly align with us. So we have all of these amazing tools in Ayurveda that help us kind of get in the boat and go downstream. So we don't feel like we're constantly kind of in the boat going upstream without a paddle. Sometimes there's herbs, right? Like I said, sometimes there's dietary prescriptions. Sometimes there's these different treatments. The cool thing about Ayurveda is Ayurveda says whatever it is that works for you. If it's apitherapy, right, acupuncture, crystals, whatever it is, right, that calls to you, Ayurveda definitely says trust that. But it's even more enhanced the more you can kind of get online with this kind of cosmic energy, these cosmic forces that are already happening. So it's like the more you fight that, the more complicated things get. And it's a little bit like, for instance, I was just reading this silly article, oftentimes I used to live in San Francisco, and people show up to San Francisco with their bikinis, right? And everybody that lives there is like, oh, you should have brought a scarf and a hat, right? So it's things like that. So when you live in San Francisco, you see tourists wearing tank tops and freezing and immediately going down to the wharf to buy sweatshirts, and you see them in their super touristy outfits because they thought they were going to Southern California, right? So it's that idea, like, oh, that's right. Like, certain things are more appropriate for certain places. And so these are really amazing tools that are super simple, that require no money, right? Just some effort, and that you can apply by sometimes just changing your schedule. Like, literally, I just have people sometimes waking up 10 minutes early, because that's all they can do right now to change their schedule. But that helps tenfold. That gives them a totally different experience to their entire day cycle. Do you guys have any questions so far?
I have a few questions for you just on this last one on the sleep cycles. What do you think of the apps and the alarm clocks that basically monitor your sleep, like your movement and noise to wake you up in a certain period of time, like 30 minutes before or after? And my second question is, I love Ayurveda, I studied a lot too, but I have some question about how, not irrelevant it is, but let's say how do we adapt it? We're in a very different climate than when it was developed. We're also different bodies, spend a lot of time in India than Indian people, and even if there's some universal constituents, I feel a lot of it, was really done for warmer climate, also more, wet. We're in a very different climate, especially in Northeast here. The weather and the light during the day is very different too. And that links to my question, a lot of Ayurvedic treatments use herbs and plants that are not plants that are around here.
Right.
And that we don't know, our body have never known or met.
Right.
Instead of using plants that are around us, that American Native Indians, or if there is any traditional herbalist here, like the few hundred years I've used. And what do you think of translating that now with local plants, and do you do that in your practice even? Like, do you adapt that with what's growing up here, those
Right.
herbs?
Right,
Sorry,
right.
it's a long question.
No, that's okay. They're all great questions. I'm not familiar with what particular app you're talking about exactly, but so as far as like using technology or using anything to help you sleep or to help get you into any sleep rhythms, what do you guys feel about like this? You guys see what I'm doing? See, I'm getting distracted. I'm pretending. But there's a rhythm. Remember we did the Brahmari in the beginning? There's a rhythm to technology that is not this rhythm. So, like when I'm working with women with infertility, like one of the first things I do is say, get everything that you can out of the bedroom that has any backlight, right? Any hum, any buzz, right? And let's get you some blackout shutters and shades so that you can start to get your diurnal patterns rhythmic. Because oftentimes the hormones, right, or the endocrine system is out of balance because there's been a lot of external stimulus that has overstimulated the nervous system. And the constant interruption from that isn't letting that nervous system find home. So, do I use my iPhone for an alarm clock sometimes? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm a modern woman. I'm a traveler. Like, I got a lot going on. However, does that thing sitting next to my bed all night make a difference? 100% yes. So if you're using apps and you're using certain things to track information, then that's like a constant relationship you're having. Anyone will tell you if you go to the mountains or you go to the ocean or you go somewhere you can steep steep like a tea, steep yourself in nature. Do you feel better? Do you all of a sudden feel healthier after maybe 2 or 3 days of that experience? Did you have to check your phone? What happens? There's this natural reset, right? That happens. So if you can work with the technology in such a way that it's not interrupting, right, your own body, then absolutely. But that's going to be different for everyone, everybody. And, we've got something unique with the city and what's around us. And, it's not every day that somebody wakes up and they're greeted with 200,000 strangers at a subway platform. So we immediately are tuned in to a really different experience, and that immediately loses our connection to that natural rhythm and our personal rhythm. So it's a hard thing for me to embrace technology as some other people are embracing technology. But that's my opinion on that. So Ayurveda is pretty interesting in the way that a lot of people think that Ayurveda is born from South India, from Kerala, right? But that's not true. Depending on who you study with and who you study and this vast bit of information, right? There are very, very cold climates up in the Himalayas where much of the Vedic science comes from. And so a lot of the herbs and a lot of the information, wasn't just 1 year and one bit of information coming from one sage. It was over the course of a great deal of time. And during that great deal of time, there was a lot of different environments and a lot of different climates and a lot of different nomadic peoples that contributed to the Charaka Samhita and the Ashtanga Hridaya, right, and the Shishruta Samhita, which are the 3 kind of texts that Ayurveda comes from. So it wasn't specific to one climate, which is why you see a very variance in some of the ideas. In the south, there's a lot of coconuts, right? If you even go to South India, right? Because it's tropical, right? So there's lots of coconuts, right? If you're in the north and you're in maybe like Tibet, Nepal, right? There's tons of yak ghee, right? And so it's because of the very difference between those climates. That being said, part of my heritage is Greek, and one of the lectures that I like to give, it talks a little bit about how Ayurveda, although it is from the Indian subcontinent, right? All of this energy and all of this experience and all of these nomadic cultures that went into this covered Persia, right? It covered even parts of Europe. It covered Afghanistan, Iran, what we know of today of these borders. It covered probably a great deal of Western Tibet and China and Bhutan and all of that, plus India, right? So you are talking about tons of different kinds of people and tons of different kinds of cultures. And so when I go to Greece and I go and I see, my proyaya, my great-grandmother who lived to be 106, and I go to her tiny village and I see their way of life, that's Ayurveda, 100%. They walk up and down every day, collecting the walnuts and the herbs and all of the fruits from the side of the road, right? They've got one dairy, right? They've got one person who's in charge of, making metals and certain things. They've got definitely their own version of their moonshine or their arishta, right? Their herbalized wines. Absolutely, the rhythm of their life and what they're doing, 100% Ayurveda. But they're Greek, right? So it's a little bit of grandma's medicine. So depending on your heritage, right? You probably have someone in your life, grandma or grandpa or otherwise, who's got some bit of knowledge from the old country. Oh, baby's sick. Here, give her this. Oh, you've got a headache? Hold on, I'll make you a porridge. It'll be good. Right? So, no matter whom I speak with, there's definitely a whole lot of wisdom. It's really, truly a medicine that is for all humans and not specific to one particular culture. It's just that it's important to honor the traditions and understand why they are coming from a particular point of view, and then learn how that applies then to your point of view. And then I forgot your last question, sorry.
No, it was about using different herbs.
Different
Instead
herbs,
of saying
yeah.
using ashwagandha.
No, so
ashwagandha.
So that's really important, and that's an interesting thing, because Dr. Patrick, so as you all know, we've got some real crosses to bear over the next couple of generations when it comes to how we are farming, right? How we are utilizing the planet's resources. And that will be of great importance to how we heal, right? And Ayurveda, it looks, like I said, at the whole when it looks at healing. So, like I said, if there is that one herb that will absolutely cure all of your conditions, but if that risks, right, the lives of workers who are going out and climbing these steep cliffs, right? If that changes the biodiversity, right, of the area because there's too much over harvesting, right? If that, on and on, right? So if those aspects are there, is that medicine the right medicine for you? And so I do believe in keep it local, how can you sustain it, and on and on. However, I will say that the Indian pharmacopoeia is pretty amazing. And I have been, studying and working with some local herbalists and trying to get to know, okay, can we grow this here? Is it possible to, is there a one-for-one trade? And sometimes yes, right? Sometimes absolutely yes, there's American herbs, there's local herbs, there's things that totally could take the place, right, of, ashwagandha or amala or, jatamansi, which is really a huge one that's been over-harvested. But sometimes no. And that's the thing that, will be our cross to bear, I think. And I totally love, how inventive and how creative people are, and that there are good people that are coming up with new solutions. But I know for myself and my practice, and then just for the education of the public in general, that it is really important to put that information out there so that people are trying to find local resources and are working with practitioners, that they're not just running out to major retailers and buying stuff off shelves, because that's a little bit of a demon. So a little bit of, like those big harvests are going to cause some things. Yes?
You could join United Plant Savers and find out what herbs you shouldn't harvest or what's endangered, so you don't use a lot of them.
That's great, yeah. And it's great. I mean, sandalwood, jalamansi, there's so many that I don't recommend at all because of what's happened. And, I have a company that, a friend of mine who has started a company, and he wanted everything to be organic. And, it's very difficult when you're working with, these international companies and then trying to work with the FDA regulations. And, I've seen hundreds of thousands of pounds of herbs not get accepted through customs. And so the blood, the sweat, the tears, literally the amount of pain that went into the growth and the harvest of that, and then to have it literally be dumped in the trash at custom borders, things like that are it's just like what Dr. Patrick was talking about, the bees, they really start to take a toll on you, and you start to say, hey, if we can get you to wake up 10 minutes early and that starts to reset your nervous system, maybe let's start there, then going straight into, these herbs that, aren't so sustainable, and that we need to think about a little bit more. So, you're very welcome.
So just going back to this rhythm that you mapped out, I
Yeah.
kind of wrote some things down, and I'm curious about how it seemed like the first part of the day, the Vata, Kapha, Pitta was sort of equally mapped to its vibration or its kind of the essence. And then it seemed like almost the converse was true on the second half of the day, and am I reading that right? Or it just seemed like it almost didn't matter, like you were talking about Vata, Kapha, Pitta in exactly the opposite way.
Yeah.
Than than the first half of the day?
Well, first half of the day, definitely a little more energetic. Second half of the day is a little bit more about the slowing down and cleaning up. You guys know your nervous system, your parasympathetic nervous system, your sympathetic nervous system. So there's a certain part of our nervous system that wants us to get on the subway and get to work and like be action orientated. And then there's another part that's like, oh my God, Thanksgiving meal, whew, I gotta sit down and digest and relax, right? So the first half of the day is more action orientated. The second half of the day is a little bit more yielding in quality.
So with the exception of this kapha being, like you mentioned, the 6 to 10 a.m. and then the 5 or 6 to 9.
Yeah.
Those actually were the opposite. So it just, I wasn't clear on, it just didn't seem to map clearly to me, and I wasn't sure if I was just misunderstanding it. And then I think you also said that you were going to talk about, you know, that 6 to 10 a.m. period for some people is not heavy lifting time, and they might be more tired, and those are the two.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. No, that's fine.
I'm really
That's
trying to
okay.
understand it.
Sure.
I'm trying to do the Ayurveda, and it didn't seem to make total sense.
Sure. So in the morning, or the early morning, that's our vata time, and then late morning is kapha. And so kapha gives you, so kapha in the body, when kapha is good, right, it's about strength, it's about fortitude, right? So this is a great time to, like I said, like do some kind of, you know, chores, some errands, some, you know, if you want to, you know, and then this is the thing too that I have to, the caveat is every practitioner is probably going to have a little different version of what they think is best. Like some people say, get up and exercise in the vata time of day, because you're light and you're free and it's really important to get the body moving, right? And then some people will say, do your exercise during the kapha time of day, because you have strength and you have endurance.
So you're going to adjust that time period where some people don't, some people are like reaching.
Because it's all individual, so depending on your unique constitution, maybe it's better for you to wait and really take care of your vata. And then when kapha time comes around, to push yourself. Right? Or vice versa. Depends on the person a little bit. And then, does anybody have kids?
Yeah.
So do you feel like falling asleep at 8 o'clock at night?
That's pretty cool because I'm up early and I do a lot, so yeah.
Okay. So usually my mothers, right, are like, oh my God, I put the kids to bed and I like almost fell asleep with them. And I was like, that's because that's when our body actually wants to go to sleep. What time does the sun go down nowadays? 4:45, 4:30? Do you guys kind of feel like going to sleep? It's like black as midnight, right? So quite literally, if we didn't live in modern times and modern structures and the grid, right, that's what we would do. We would go find a tree or a cave or whatever and we'd start to hole up for the night. That would be the best solution, right? To hunker down, get the homestead, right? Happy, healthy, and be there, be put. But we have meetings, we have plays, we have music concerts, we've got whatever's going on, we got all these things going on. So we kind of, you know, stimulate beyond, according to the body, what's wanted, what's necessary.
So then just one more question on that.
Of course.
I'm still on this. The other one that just didn't seem to like resonate for me in terms of my sensibility and like what I've seen in the world is Vata at 2 p.m. and that's the best time to have a creative meeting. Like everyone I know is falling asleep at 3.
Because
they're picking up their kids and they're like, oh, this is the worst part of my day. This is when I want to shine for my kids and pick them up, and I'm so tired.
exactly.
You know, so like, can you address that?
Because what happened during lunch? Did they stop? Did they eat
Well, these
food?
are people who are eating good lunches. These are people who are like, you know, I mean,
Right.
that's why I'm just wondering if it's not lunch,
Right.
is this a again, like you answered that other question I had, is this just a constitutional difference?
It could be a constitutional thing, but if you're that depleted in the afternoon, if there's no energy there, then generally what you've set up prior to that is depleting you rather than giving you what you need. Because if you can't go the distance from like morning until, 6 p.m. or whatever, there's that big crash there, then maybe you're eating the nectar, the ambrosia, the amrita, but you're not digesting it. you're not digesting your food or your experience. So whatever came before you, it's all here. And by the time you drop into your body and you have an embodied experience, you're like, whew, right?
Like you mean the next phase? That's the kapha
No, so just drop into your body. So people live here, and when they start to experience here, they go, shit, I'm wiped out. And that means that you need some rebuilding from the container up.
Now you're mentioning that just continuing what you're saying, that what they had for lunch, if they digested or not, would affect, you know, you're saying that you hear people crash a lot at 3 p.m, which I also experience, not personally, but I hear a lot of people complaining about that. But I would also think the bigger picture would be what's the general stress in their life, what is the state of their endocrine system, where are their adrenals at, their thyroid, etc. So even if they had a fabulous lunch, they're sitting down, they've digested, there are other factors that are going to affect where they're at 2 or 3 in the afternoon that have nothing to do with necessarily that particular lunch of the day.
Absolutely. So that's what I'm saying a little bit, is that yes, lunch is one component, but it's this whole rhythmic quality. And this whole rhythmic quality is your endocrine system, right? And it is your metabolism. And it is, guess what? Your body, right? Your circulatory system has a particular rhythm to it. And if that rhythm gets shifted or altered in such a way, right? You could have a blood clot, you could have a heart attack, you could have a stroke, right? So, and those are extreme examples, of course. But these rhythms, right, of this whole thing, it really likes, so for instance, going back to like when I was a nanny, nobody was drinking green juice. Nobody was, eating farro salads. None of that was going on, right? There was like Rice Krispies or, I don't even know what. But guess what? Like, this was a really German family, so once we got on rhythm, we got on rhythm. And that was good enough. Do you know what I mean? That was good enough for keeping the immunity, the happiness, and the healthiness of the home going, right? It wasn't that, they were having the perfect quinoa this, and it wasn't that they were having like the perfect, it was that there was this dynamic, consistent pattern to the day. And when that was working, everybody was in their bliss. So what happened when they would go on vacation and they would do this or do that and shift it a little bit? They would come back and they'd have some cranky kids and some situations for a couple of days, and then guess what? We would get back on rhythm.
More like balance, just general overall balance.
So it's just more like, having some level of discipline with it, one area of your life. Maybe you just start with being like, okay, you know what? I'm going to eat lunch. I'm going to eat lunch every day at 1 o'clock. And that's it. And that can be the medicine. And the cool thing is then your body knows that lunch is coming. So over time, 3 days, 4 days, a week, your digestive system actually strengthens because it's like, hey, give me that food. Where is that? And so those are, I'm sure I'm going over time. Am I going over time? Yeah. So those are those little things that we can do to actually make, I know it's going to sound crazy, but huge changes in our health. And like I said, no money, right? So it's a great way to, to kind of take back your health a little bit without having to go and spend, $400 at the health food store for this herb or that herb or blah, 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 blah. Thanks, you guys. I really appreciate it.